Hi there, my name's Anne and I'm one of the team leaders for Crisis at Christmas Healthcare Service. I'm going to talk a little bit about the team leader role, which is a really important role in our service. Team leaders can be drawn from any occupational group in our service. They might be a doctor, a nurse, a pharmacist or a receptionist. It's more important that team leaders have experience of working with crisis and crisis policies than that they know a lot of clinical things or that they have clinical seniority. So what do you do as a team leader when you work for Crisis? Well, in the morning when we all come together at the start of shift, we have our morning briefing. After our morning briefing, what we'd ask you to do is gather your team together and first of all count them, and that's going to come back a lot as a thing that we need to do. Make sure you've got everybody that you think you should have on your team and that they're all recorded on your clinic list. Then check that you've got all the kit and things like that you need with your team, and make sure that you get all of your team together and get them all onto the correct bus. That's a really basic thing but a very important one. Once you're on the bus or back at centre if you're waiting for transport, have a little bit of a briefing. Ask everybody in your team to introduce themselves to each other again, make sure everyone knows what everybody else does, and also a very important thing here for you as the team leader, check everybody's identification and check that they've all got an appropriate badge. Make sure you count the people again. You've got to count people every time they get on a bus, get off a bus, because honestly, if you lose someone, we will never let you forget it. Have a chat with people as well about what their experience is and what they do in their day job. You might find that you get some really interesting kind of areas of expertise come out. You might also identify some gaps in people's experience that they want to talk about. They might have some anxieties about that, how you'd meet those gaps and how you'd work with different guests between you. When you get to the centre, one of the first things as a leader you have to do is negotiate getting into the centre. Now that can sometimes be a bit of a struggle because there'll be somebody sitting on the desk who won't want to let you in because none of your team is on their shift list. That's fine. What you need to do is get hold of somebody called the Services Coordinator. That's a key volunteer in the centre with responsibility for services. They'll be expecting you and they'll know where to take you all. Just make sure you count everyone again before you take them in because this would be a bad time to lose anybody. Make sure you know where your clinic's going to be and check that that area is appropriate. If it's not, talk to the services coordinator about things you might do to help that. Identify where the nearest person with a radio is in your centre. That's going to be important if you need to contact the shift office at the centre or if you need to contact a green badge. If your clinic location happens to be quite remote, say in a basement, it might be worth going to the shift office and asking if you and the team can have a radio for yourselves. It's important, I think, to go off and find the shift office and also find the green badges and introduce yourself to them. And I like to do that while the rest of the team is setting up the clinic area. I tend to let them do that and not interfere because first of all, it's quite a good team building thing for them. Secondly, it helps them familiarise themselves with the kit. While they're doing that, what you're doing is going off, finding the shift office so you know where that is, finding the green badges, introducing yourself, maybe asking them if there are any guests they've got any concerns about, asking them to point those guests out to you if there's anything that they need to let you know. This is also a really good time to negotiate when your team's going to have a lunch break and where they're going to go for lunch. During the clinic, the role that you have will sort of depend on your occupational group, but it'll also depend on how busy the clinic is. If you're the receptionist as the team leader, you're going to be up front all day. If you're the pharmacist, you might bob in and out of the clinic. One of your really important roles is to be a liaison between the healthcare team and the centre volunteers. That might include rebriefing some of the centre volunteers about confidentiality issues and about maybe, issues with guests that they come up with. For your team, your role is very much to be a facilitator. You need to advise them on crisis policies and also on processes and really practical things. So for example, if you've got a guest you think needs to go to A&E or to the out of hours, how should they get there? Do they need to go in an ambulance? Could the centre organise a car? How should that happen? There might be other practical things like, can this guest get some new clothing or a shower if, for example, you've diagnosed scabies? Or actually, is this just somebody who's a little bit anxious and distressed, might need a quieter place to sit or a quieter place to go? So you'll be the person who liaises between the healthcare team and the rest of the volunteers in the centre. It's really important to keep an eye on your team welfare, not in a kind of overt keep asking them if they're all right way, but just keep an eye on them. Make sure people don't look bored or stressed or tired. Make sure they have proper breaks. And actually one of the most important things as a team leader, you've got to keep the coffee and the tea and the snacks coming. You need to find out where the tea point is, make sure that happens. Make sure people do take breaks and make sure that you close the clinic for lunchtime. We eat with the guests at lunchtime, which is fantastic. It gives us an opportunity to get to know them, and often they come and see us afterwards because they've started that conversation at lunchtime. Make sure the clinic ends on time. So there's something about being cited on what the time is, and if you need to, you might also want to check that your transport arrangements are all sorted out if there's anything you need to do there. It's really important that you ensure that all of the kit's packed up at the end of the clinic and that it all comes back with us. Make sure that clinical waste is disposed of appropriately. We'll have told you where that needs to go. Make sure there's enough people coming back on the bus with the kit, and again, just count them. Make sure you've got the right number of people coming back and you haven't left anyone at the centre. It's also really important at this point, I think, to thank the centre volunteers, particularly the services coordinators who have looked after you during the day. Do a quick debrief. Now, when you do that is up to you. Some people do it at the centre before people leave. Some people do it on the bus on the way back. Some people wait until they get back to the base. I like to just see how people are feeling and how it feels to me at the time and sort of wing it. When you're doing your debrief, some of that is about practical stuff. So, for example, have people done their documentation and updated all of that? Is there anything that needs handing over for the next team who are going to that centre? There's also something about checking on your team's welfare, making sure everyone's okay. Has anyone had a guest that for them has been difficult or distressing? Do they want to talk about that? There's something as well about thanking your team. It's really important to thank your team for giving up their time and coming and contributing. I like to ask my team to share something that's happened in the centre that afternoon or that morning that's been really good for them, so we can then share that more widely at the bigger team briefings during the week. When we get back to base, the really important thing is to make sure that A, you've still got the right number of volunteers, there's a theme emerging here, isn't there? And also that all of the kit that you've brought back gets taken up to the healthcare base, doesn't get left downstairs, and then it all gets restocked. And then that's it, you're done for the night, and it's time to head off, possibly to the pub, possibly home to sleep. Thank you very much.